Welcome to the League of Legends patch preview. In this video, we'll be covering some of the major changes coming into the next patch for League of Legends. Skarner is getting a huge suite of buffs in the next patch. What problems are we fixing here?
One thing about Skarner, now that players have had a real good chance to figure him out and kind of get used to him, we wanted to see where he really stood versus where he needed to be. The main thing we wanted to change about him was his Crystal Slash had a scaling mana cost that went up as you ranked the skill, which had constantly left Skarner out of mana and unable to do anything. We've flattened and lowered that mana cost across all ranks to make sure that Skarner can always be using the skill that's designed to be reusable and spammable. Skarner's attack speed per level was considerably lower than where it probably needed to be for a fighter who does a lot of auto-attacking. We brought that up by a significant amount. You know, Skarner's using his Crystal Slash a lot, and he's also auto-attacking to bring that cooldown down. Without the attack speed per level, he's just not able to do that as effectively as he needs to. Finally, we've increased the duration of Skarner's ultimate Impale to better reflect its ultimate kind of nature. It is a hard CC, it does drag people around, but it didn't quite have that this is my big skill, this is my marquee moment feeling, and I think that's what Skarner players expect. So we've increased that by a little bit. We'll see where it stands after this, and we'll be evaluating from here.
Almost all of Hextech Gunblade stats are getting hit in the next patch. What are the goals of this nerf?
We ran some math on Hextech Gunblade, and the stats that you get for the amount of gold are frankly pretty insane. We took a look at that. For these hybrid characters, you know, the Akalis, the Ajax, those guys that are out there, they're getting so much gold value from this single item that it just makes sense that they buy this and they go from, hey, this guy was manageable, into, holy crap, what do I do now? Instead of hitting any one thing significantly, we've tried to hit everything a little bit to make it so Gunblade still feels like the item that people are buying that they have fun with, but it's not quite as powerful. The other thing we did is really Dominion focused. We've made the spell vamp on Hextech Gunblade unique. What you're seeing on Dominion in this kind of like more skirmishy, dueling kind of game that goes on there is people using the spell vamp with stacked gunblades to become essentially invulnerable to one or two targets at a time. You know, we're seeing this again on Akali and Jax, also on characters like Cho'Gath and other characters you wouldn't expect to necessarily do this. That usually signifies a problem. That change will give it the nerfs it needs on Dominion without us needing to affect it more on Summoner's Rift.
Corki's Gatling gun is getting somewhat remade. Instead of hitting for a % of his total damage and having the number of hits scale with level, we're normalizing it. It lasts 4 seconds at all levels, has an actual base damage, and now scales off of bonus damage instead of base damage. What are the goals here?
Gatling gun's kind of an old school skill that it's a little clunky and needs a little help. It has what we like to call a bad best case, worst case scenario, which means some cases, Corki's Gatling gun is just tearing through people, doing tons of damage, shredding armor, doing all this stuff, and other times you tap a guy with it once and it doesn't do anything. We don't like that about it. I don't think Corki players are particularly attached to that. So what we did is, instead of making the duration scale as it goes up, we made it a flat rate that's in the middle. We actually give it a base damage as well as scaling, and we've actually bumped kind of that base damage up from deriving out of his total attack damage into its own value. What this does is not only gives it a buff in the now, but also allows us to tune additional knobs and make adjustments to both of these things when balancing Corki, so that we can make sure Gatling gun stays a viable and not overpowered skill in the future.
We have a number of changes coming in for Dominion, from game mechanics to personal score. What can players expect in the coming update?
We do have some Dominion-specific changes. You know, a lot of people have had a chance to play Dominion, get their impressions about it. Everybody does have their favorite strategies they're starting to fall into now. While we do want to let the metagame settle, because we think players will find a lot of things to counter things they may think are too strong now, there are some adjustments we want to do in the short term that we know are problems and that we can address immediately. One new system we introduced to Dominion was the idea of personal score. The old kind of kill-death assist ratio thing wasn't a good indicator of who was doing well on Dominion and who was doing poorly. We think players really enjoy being able to measure themselves up against the other players in the game. The problem with personal score currently is that it doesn't reward all the actions that make you successful as a team in Dominion. It really does a good job of rewarding offense and kills, but it does not do a good job of rewarding minion pushing or defensive points. And those are really important actions in Dominion, as I think a lot of people have started to figure out more and more as time's gone on. So what we've done is we've increased the amount of personal score you gain from actively defending points against opponents, as well as increased the personal score gain from pushing minions. This will mean if you're that player that goes bottom and does the lane pushing and messes around with the bottom while your team fights top, instead of coming out of it with a lower score regardless of your performance, your score will start reflecting your contribution to your team. One of the changes that looks smaller on paper than it actually is the ambient XP reduction. We've reduced ambient XP by about 10% for all characters. One thing we're seeing a lot on Dominion is hyper carries and very rapidly scaling characters are seeing a lot of play and a lot of dominance on Dominion, and one of those things that's contributing to that is the inevitability of a late game. This XP nerf is going to reduce the inevitability of that into closer or longer games. So when you take a hyper carry champion, instead of being like, I know I'll get to this point and then I will dominate, you go, if the game gets to this point, I know I'll be stronger, so I'm kind of betting on a long game. This allows teams to develop strategies around these hyper carries and around that different game length. We'll be looking at this as a general balancing point in the future. We wanted to start with the 10% XP reduction, and we're going to continue to look at XP, gold, and other factors that are determining game length and scaling of characters. One mechanic in Dominion is that when you kill enemies, you reduce the enemy's Nexus health. This works up until the enemy's Nexus health is 125 or lower, in which kills stop counting against it. What this change aims to do is to make sure that that early game matters. Right now we're seeing a lot of teams get to the 125 to 125 state regardless of the early game actions, and we don't think that's a good differentiation of skill. We think early game should matter, mid game should matter, and late game should matter. And this change is one step in the direction of making that be completely balanced and even. We'll be looking at more adjustments as we go forward, but we think this is going to have a pretty major impact on making sure the most skilled team wins every game in Dominion.
Thanks for tuning in to the League of Legends Patch Preview. Please subscribe to the Riot Games YouTube channel and don't forget to thumbs us up just below the video.